then Andrew, if you want to come in.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, I want to make sure I got this right. So I don't want you to feel cornered. I just want to make sure that I'm giving back what you're saying to you. Are you saying that small towns in the 1800s developed systems for prostitution so that the men there would not sexually assault the women?
And yes, and I'm not saying specific, I don't know what time period, but whenever sex work started, yes.
Whenever that's, well, I mean, sex work's been around.
It's been around in America, right? At least, because we're one nation under God.
It's been around since America's founding.
Yeah, since America's founding, sex work has been a thing, and it was started to prevent that from happening.
To prevent sexual
because
assault.
there's good women and women who are considered whores. They so would you say know. Then? So they would be coerced into that.
I understand what you're saying. So would you say then that you think that women who operate as prostitutes would have been less likely or more likely to get sexually assaulted by men?
It's a great question.
The reason why they were even in that job is because they were more likely to be SA'd.
Yeah, but do you think that they would be more likely or less likely to be SA'd as prostitutes?
The whole point of them not being SA'd...
He's not asking about the point of them. It's a simple question. Do you think they'd be more likely or less likely to be SA'd as prostitutes?
More likely, yes.
Right. So
that's
then,
just
so then if the system was
it's always
to do
more
that
likely for sex workers to be SA'd.
So I just want to make sure I got the system right. So if the system is this is being developed in order to cut down on SA, and yet you're putting women in a position where they're more likely to be SA'd, does that even make sense to you?
SA of the good women is what I think she said.
I don't know if you're understanding my point. I'm talking from a historical where sex work started in the beginning when America was found. Like, it's been around forever.
Where did you hear this? Where did you get this information?
I've looked up multiple articles and historical.
Here, you wanted to come in? Go ahead.
Because I'd like...
Yeah, what she's talking... So, like, what you were saying is, like, wouldn't they be more likely to? A lot of these women that were put into sex work in times like that, they had already been SA'd by the time that they were like of
they
puberty.
They were considered the town.
They were seen as dirty, so they were not. Nobody wanted
and coerced
to marry
into
them.
doing.
Why were they considered dirty?
I don't know.
Because if they weren't married, if they weren't
because they weren't married.
Yes.
So in other words, the societal standard says to them,
yes,
our standard is that you can't step out, you can't have sex outside of wedlock, you can't do these kinds of things. They did that anyway, violating the societal standard. So the men went kind of pushed aside and went, you're undesirable, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if they're undesirable, you're saying the only way they could carve out a living is to be prostitutes?
They didn't make... I'm trying to make a point that they were coerced into doing it to prevent men to not SA the good women of the town. Because those men would be married and they would step out of their marriage, and so the
I got it. So walk me through this.
Of the city or the town.
Do you think that men got around in a table inside of one of these towns?
These women did not decide at the beginning. It's decided now.
Listen to his question.
Hold on just one sec.
$200. Brian, you should have kept the super chats at $99. The same is likely this poor gal's IQ. The delusion is super strong with this one. Feminism has nothing to do with anything this girl is talking about.
Grid one, thank you, man. We'll probably lower it later on in the show. It's just we want to get through this early part quickly. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you think that men got in a room and they were like talking in one of these towns? One's like, hey, Chuck, I'm really worried about the virtuous women of our town being sexually assaulted by Steve over there. So why don't we take all the undesirable women and we'll just make them all prostitutes so that doesn't... Does that even sound realistic to you?
That's where brothels were developed.
No, that's not how brothels were developed.
Then can you explain how they were?
Yeah, brothels are developed because women can make easy coin being prostitutes, and many of them have no skills or didn't desire to have any skills. And a lot of people moved. A lot of women actually migrated from eastern areas to western areas in order to become prostitutes during the pioneering phase, because they made a ton of money during the gold rush. So these were choice-based things. Nobody forced them into it. It's ridiculous.
I'm not saying it's forced. It's that these women were casted out from society for not getting married or being considered.
Yeah, so they were shunned. That's true.
They
but
were shunned.
No patriarchy got together and was like,
I
you
didn't
must
mention
be
pa- I didn't
you
mention
must be
patriarchy.
a prostitute because we're shunning you from society. You're not even shunned, really. It's you're a social outcast because you're not desired by men because you have violated the rules and norms of society.
Hold on.
Can
You
I-
go, and then you go,
Yeah,
and then Sav, go ahead.
You keep talking about.
Can you
these
scoot your
women-
mic this way?
You're evading my. You're doing a debate thing
Excuse
where
me.
you're
Hold
evading.
Hold on.
Stop.
Go ahead. You go,
So
and then Sav.
you keep. So what I said was that these women had already been essayed before they had ever entered sex work, and then you said, though these were their choices.
No, that
You said that
Yeah.
because they're impure. So you
So I'll
think that
respond
because
to
a
this.
woman is impure,
the
if
claim
someone else has
that
done that to
the
her.
claim that women engaged in prostitution because they were SA'd and that's why they engaged in is ridiculous. You could never
wanna-
prove that.
That
Do you wanna
wasn't the
look up a
point I was
study on
trying
that?
to make. You're doing
Go
a
ahead,
debate.
look up any study that you want that prostitutes were only prostitutes because they had been
So do you want me
SA'd.
to find a study about how many prostitutes have been sexually
Well, that's not
assaulted
the
before?
claim. The claim that you made was they
No.
were prostitutes because they were SA'd.
No, I'm saying that that's what happened before. The likelihood.
What's your point? Go ahead.
I would like to say that the patriarchy is not a group of men, a specific group of men. It's like a description or a describing word to, or for social structures that we have, ingrained into our society and ingrained into a variety of societies and cultures. So it's not just one group of people. Also, sex work. Shit. Sorry.
Who's at the
That's fine.
Who's at the top of that though? Inside
There's
of the
not
patriarchy.
a individual that's on top of.
Then what's a
patriarchy.
matriarchy?
Led by feminine values.
So then
or
there's somebody on
feminine-
top of the archy, right? That is female in a matriarchy.
So it depends on what you're using the word for. So like when we talk
He said
about,
matriarchy, not patriarchy.
I know they're like opposing words, like for different.
Yeah, but who's on
situations.
top in a matriarchy?
So in a matriarchy, a woman is on top. If we're talking about a matriarchal society, but whenever we're talking about a matriarchal society, we're usually using it in a historical context. So we're describing how a specific society functioned, like within their households and stuff like that. When we talk about the patriarchy in a modern context, we're talking about the qualities and structures that a society has within it. So I would say, to just throw in a point that kind of correlates with patriarchy, capitalism is a patriarchal structure that we have within our society,
boy.
and within
Okay.
a lot of societies.
So men. So just to
I
make
would
sure I got the definition
partially
down.
agree.
hold on.
Stop.
Hold on.
Oh, sure.
No. So you
Go ahead.
you go.
Oh, I was just wondering. I just want to make sure I get the definition down. So women can be in charge in a patriarchy.
I mean, a woman could be a manager at a job in a patriarchy.
That's not really my question, though. I'm
Okay.
trying. So you're saying that this is a developed system, and this is a descriptor for how the West works, or how different different nations work. You're using this as a descriptor for the systems, and the systems are what creates a patriarchal system. Can at the top of this patriarchal system exist all female leaders? Theoretically.
I guess if the women were upholding patriarchal standards, then yes.
So why wouldn't that be a matriarchy then?
I guess it depends on the definition that you're using,
Right, that's
or
what I'm using here.
the
So
connotations.
it seems to me that patriarchy has no meaning if you're removing men from being at the top of the patriarchate, right? Just like matriarchy. Could you imagine how foolish it would sound if I said, oh, there was this great matriarchy with a king and princes and everything that wasn't matriarchal, right? So this is why I'm trying to get kind of your definition for these systems.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think what I'm saying that's not getting across the way that I want it to be is that there's different kind of in between the lines depending on what situation you're talking about, matriarchies.
So here's a
patriarchies.
clarifying question for you. I'm
Okay.
going to simplify it. He asked you if it could still be a patriarchy if there's women at the top managing it, and you said if they're upholding patriarchal structures, it could still be a patriarchy. What do you mean by that? What are those patriarchal structures that those women at the top would theoretically be upholding?
Capitalism would be a good example.
Women benefit from capitalism. You benefit from
Anybody
it. How is
can.
that?
There's benefits and negatives.
Wait, so are you against capitalism?
Theoretically, yes. I think that there are
But
ways
in
that
practice,
it could become better.
in practice, you do OnlyFans, so
I
theoretically,
have
you're not
to
against
be able
it.
to live. I have to be able to live.
So
know?
you're taking advantage of capitalism in
Yes,
order
I
to
am.
live. Okay. Are you more in favor of like socialism or communism?
Yeah, what system? If
think-
you don't like capitalism, what system would you prefer to see?
Yeah. What's matriarchal?
Capitalism is when you're
Stop.
working
Hold on.
under.
This is a question for her.
So, I guess by definition, it sounds very radical of me, and I do consider myself to be a radical feminist. But I guess communism, the very simplistic definition that I have of communism, the utopian society that I envision would be a communist society, and that is because we would have like a trade and barter system. So I could provide, what I'm good at providing, what I enjoy to provide. You could provide to our, to our shared society.
A stateless
what you would-
society.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
so-
I think that it would be very complicated to go from where we are right now.
So I can end this
to
argument
that.
very quickly for you.
We're not arguing about it. I'm just stating
Well,
my
no,
opinion.
I can actually change your mind about this.
I don't-
Hang on, I can change your entire mind about this. I promise.
Okay.
Inside of your stateless society, you would have to have an enforcement arm, like police officers or something like this, to deal with criminals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you? How could you enforce a hierarchy inside of your society without appealing to a hierarchy to do it?
Why would I need a hierarchy?
Because a stateless society is one without a hierarchy. We would agree that that's true. So if that is true, how could you enforce the norms of a stateless society without appealing to a hierarchy to do so?
So the norms that would be in my stateless society, I don't know how big this, would be, but we're talking about a hypothetical, I guess. So in my stateless society, the norms would be to commit ethical decisions. There
Sure.
would be a
What if
board
somebody
of the
violates
community.
those?
Yeah. Then what?
Then then you have enforcement to take care of that, right?
Because people will inevitably violate.
Yeah.
So
I've had this conversation
So if
before. I
people
actually really
will
like it.
violate the norms of that society and you have to appeal to enforcement, that is a hierarchy.
Grid 1 Motorsports donated $200. Patriarchy values women, protect them and cherish them. The idea that it preys on women is absolutely trash intellectualism. Feminism has failed you. How may the
Grid
patriarchy help you today?
Bingo.
Is that a-
Andrew, did you want to continue on with your point
Yeah,
about?
if you don't mind.
Oh, of course, go ahead,
So I'm
go
just saying, think about the absurdity here. Inside of a stateless society, there can be no hierarchy. If you have a hierarchy, you have a state. How do you enforce the norms of your stateless society without appealing to a hierarchy?
It would be I guess it would be somewhat of a hierarchy. There's two levels: those who commit ethical decisions and those who do not commit ethical decisions. And what's decided to be ethical is decided upon by the community.
Sure.
And then in my mind, the only things that can really come up to me that would require severe punishment or what was the word that you were using?
Enforcement.
Enforcement, yes, would be murder and essay.
No, there's tons of
what
other
about
things.
theft?
Theft, all kinds of things.
I don't, in a society when there's not a sense of scarcity, I don't think that theft would be a problem.
I mean,
unless there's somebody that's a kleptomaniac. That would
Let's
be like
take
the
all
only
those off then.
situation.
Just violence itself, violent crime, stuff like that. If you're going to have violent crimes inside of a society, you're going to have enforcers, big, strong enforcers to go take care of any violent criminals who exist, right? Like that's going to
Yes.
be necessary.
Wait,
right?
do you in your society that you envision, do you reject the idea that there would be a criminal element? You think it would be impossible for criminality to materialize?
Not necessarily. I don't think it would be necessarily impossible, but then again, I haven't seen a case study where a society lives like this, to
But the
see whether
human-
or not it would,
Why do you think it would be possible then?
for there to be a society without crime
No,
or violence.
this
Okay.
stateless society that you're talking about, where nobody's stealing from one another, there's abundance everywhere, there's no scarcity, everybody's conforming to the same social norms, there's no hierarchy. I mean, you're describing what you call communism, but this is not. This
Very
is
loose,
communism has
loosely.
never played out like this.
Yeah.
You've had like small societies that have been communes where people have shared the same social values and they get along relatively well. But like, can you name a single time in history when what you're describing has ever happened at scale?
No, that's why I said that this was like a utopic type. This is where my values lie. And I do think that it would be very difficult for a society like the one that we have modernly to transition to this type of utopian
But
society
if
that I'm
it's
describing.
stateless, that would be absent hierarchy. Even inside of what you're describing is not stateless because you say that there is a value group who assesses what is moral and is immoral and is ethical and not ethical. that in and of itself is going to be a hierarchy and thus not stateless.
I didn't use the word stateless. I didn't bring it up in like,
Well,
oh,
that-
some
you just
stateless
agreed to
society.
But that is communism,
I
right?
don't-
Communism is a stateless society. That is what is postulated by communism, is it not?
I use the word communism very loosely. It's commune, so we're living in a community, and ism. You know.
Wait, so are you saying in this utopian society that you desire to live in, what would be the population of said society? Because currently in the U.S., the population's over, what, 300 million?
330 million.
Yeah.
right
Okay.
now.
So are you talking like 200 people?
Something like that would be cool. I mean, I don't know how, because,
Okay.
like I said, I haven't seen a case study, right? So I don't know how many.
So, okay,
we didn't
you
have
have
modes
your
of
society
transport,
of
for
200
example.
people. What do we do with the other 330 million people just in the United States? Do they
have their
also?
own society that have different ethical systems?
Ken,
And
what,
then-
what was your name
Okay.
again?
Caitlin.
Caitlin.
Yeah.
I say this with all due respect. I think this utopia that you're describing is fundamentally completely incompatible with human nature and will never exist at scale. Because, and I don't say this to insult you, but because human beings naturally organize themselves into hierarchies.
Do you have evidence of this that you could show me?
All of human
Every
history.
single-
When you walked
All of
into
human
this
history.
room, when you walked into this room to set up the podcast, there was a guy who was in charge, and he told you to go over there and fill out this form.
Yes.
And then he told you where you're going to sit, and he
Yes.
told you which mic you're going to speak into, and he told you everything. The very second we walked into this room, all of us together, the entire room was organized quickly by hierarchy in a hierarchical structure, and everybody was told exactly what their role was.
Yes.